Call the meeting to order for the Committee of the Whole. Excuse me, for November the 12th, 2019. Approval of the agenda, that the November 12th Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be adopted as presented. Moved second, all those in favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes, that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held November the 4th, 2019 be adopted as presented. Moved second. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Business. We're going to review the proposed amendments to our financial plan. Mr. Fortolotsky, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, my colleague Dale Corris will be briefing up the proposed changes that he would propose to you reference the financial plan. So, as you know, sometimes reality has a vote as far as plans go, and we passed the financial plan before May this year, and we cannot run a deficit. And the good news is that these amendments will not see a deficit, clearly, because we're not allowed to run one. But we will not also require any further taxpayer dollars. But really what this is a reassignment of the resources that we already have to, again, to reality. Which projects were able to get done, which ones weren't to the degree that we had hoped, and what new things had appeared on the horizon that required a reassignment of these funds. So again, I'd like to reassure you that this is not bad news in any way. This is just reality. And in years going forward and years in past, you've all, I believe, experienced amendments coming before year end just to reflect that reality again. So I'd like to pass off then to Mr. Dale Corris.
Thank you. So what you have in your package, and I'll just bring it up on the screen as well. And so what I've got on the general fund, the sewer fund, and water fund, I'm just going to speak to the more relevant, bigger numbers for changes. There's a lot of, I'll just speak to them briefly now, but there's a bit of a shift, small little shifts on vehicles and some wage accounts. There's no increase in wages, obviously. It's just that as things progress throughout the year, things come up. Of course, we're not mind readers when we budget. We try to do the best we can, but some vehicles might require more attention, some less. Some projects might come in a bit over budget and some come in less, so I'll speak to those. So I'm going to touch on the bigger items. Feel free to ask questions as I go along. Kevin's here to also help out with answering any questions you might have on his department, that side of things. So starting off on the pages aren't numbered, but one of my packages. So page 1, which I guess is page 5 in your package. So we gained $32,000 more in payments in lieu of taxes, which is a good news thing. The next item is just a small adjustment on what we budgeted versus what we actually got in the small community grant. The conditional grant revenue that you see there, the $316, that's that one-time gas tax payment that every municipality got over and above the regular. So that wasn't known at the time of our budget, so that's new money coming in. That's obviously good news. And further on, I'll show you where I'm putting that money. Bank interest, I'm budgeting another $20,000. The tax penalties, which isn't a great number to add to because it means people were more than what we expected facing the penalty. The reserve revenues you see there, what that involves is when we get contributions from developers, we got one on 3rd Avenue and they did that project. There's a couple other $20,000 type ones in there. But the big number in there is $650,000 regarding the station house. I'll speak to where those monies are going later on as I move along. Fire protection agreements, we gained on both those, and the reason for that is that budget time, when we do the Fraser Valley Regional District numbers, it's based on a prior year's actuals and budgets, so the numbers are hard to determine at budget time. So in this case, we gain more on those contracts for fire protection. Commercial user fees, that's for the waste management. We feel we can gain another 15,000 on that based on the quarterly billings. The next two are very good news items. 30,000 additional planning fees, 160,000 in building permit fees, which is probably the best year that since I've been here, certainly in the building department. So that's a good news item there. Legal, unfortunately, we have to bump that up to meet legal bills for this year. The finance wages and benefits, I was able to drop that nearly $60,000, and that's basically because I've been away quite a bit this year, so there's savings there. Public Works men, we had to bump up near 17 to meet the current contract obligations. Again, these smaller items for vehicles I won't speak to, there's just kind of a lot of ins and outs. But the other purpose of doing this amendment too is it helps me prepare for actual numbers moving forward to next year. So I have the latest in an amended budget to be able to compare as my starting point for next year's budget. So hence the reason that we're going through this effort here on these smaller ticket items. One unit there cost a bit more this year, but however we're saving on some other units as we go along here. For example, that unit there, we feel we can save there, another one there. Roads wages, again, that one was dropped because of people that were off on compensation claims, so the district wasn't obliged for wages, so there was savings on that. Roads contracts and line paving, that came in as actual, so we were able to adjust those down. Town garbage, again, it's just a wage allocation. There's more wages in this particular account, but we're also grabbing from other wages, so they net out at the end of the day. These are the two big ones that we're faced with. To meet the new contract, we had to bump up residential by 205,000 and commercial by 110. So those numbers that you see there are going to be probably what's going to be very close into next year's budget. So there won't be any significant increases over those numbers. This account here, we budgeted under this, and that was under the old contractor, so Kevin and I, we talked, and we've created this new account, which is basically to cover all the containers that, you know, at the parks and along the streets and that go up to the transfer station. So we created this new account. We got rid of this one, that seemed to be related to the prior contractor, so we've got savings there. The landfill contracts we dropped down, that's to do with the monitoring of the landfill, and that's based on expected costs by the end of the year. Of course, we lost the building inspector partway through the year, so we've got some savings there, but then we also had to bump up because the regional district was contracted out to cover for that. This is just a result of a capital project that wasn't done this year. It's carried forward, so that's been bumped up. we got money, for the sale of some land, I believe it was at the Public Works Yard. So we got some money from the sale of land, so I'm putting that money into the reserve. Planning to, council goes for suggestions. This was an unexpected cost, that came in after our budget was adopted. So we had to cover some final costs on the roof at 444 Park. This one we just dropped down based on actual. And I was able to, through the process here, add another $154,000 into the infrastructure reserve. Increase the fire department reserve to what's actual for what was, this is basically a annual $50,000 contribution to the reserve, and then the $26,000 and change is based on the increases that you saw on the fire protection agreements on the capital side of things, so I've increased that to match that. This one here, we're only expected to pay about $135,000 for the new engine by the end of December, so what I've done is I've reduced it both on the cost and also on the reserve transfer. And then I've included it, and I'll speak to that at the end, where there's some projects that I've put into 2020 so that with this adoption of this bylaw, the fire chief and Kevin and whoever else it relates to can get going January 1st if need be. If we had to wait till May, then that's obviously causing some problems, so. This project came in a bit over budget, so we had to add some there. This one here, I was able to add a lot more into that vehicle reserve. Part of that was from the sale of a vehicle, and also just because we've gained some more revenues at the end of the day, I thought we'd try to build that reserve up a bit more. This capital project here is going to be carried forward again. We have an addition of some capital for computer needs. They're desperate out of the Public Works for that. I put $31,000 into the community development regulatory reserve. That's basically to help down the road when we do OCP reviews and things like that, so we can pull from that. Seeing as that the building and planning had such a great year, I thought I'd give them a little bit into their reserve to build that up more than what it already is. There's the transfer I'm putting into the gas tax reserve from that 360 that I spoke at the top. So that's additional money that we can have in our gas tax reserve. For the time being, I've just created a station house reserve so that it can earn interest on its own, pending whatever the outcome down the road is. It's just on its own, so it's separated from other reserves. This number here is the debenture for the rec center, which was probably taken out 20 years ago. Our final payment was this year. So that's the return of the cash deposit. Initially borrowed, they take off a percentage and put it into a demand reserve. We get that money back at the end of the debt, so that money I put into the appropriate reserve because that's what the borrowing is for. So that balances the general fund down to zero, which has to be balanced first. On the sewer fund, not so many items. We gained some more revenue on the connect fees, just a slight adjustment on insurance. Because there were some vehicles relating to the water and sewer funds that were the numbers up in the general fund were increased. I had to increase the allocation in the sewer and water fund. This was moved over from the general fund because this $15,000 grant was actually for the sewer master planning grant, so it should go into the sewer fund. And then unfortunately we had some overages on the PCC upgrades, finishing that project off. In order to balance the budget, I've had to And again, that may not be the number at the end of the year, but for purposes of the amendment, we had to pull another 25, almost 26,000 from the sewer reserve, which more or less is to cover this one here. On the water side of things, some small adjustments, more connect fees than we anticipated. Again, a shuffle of wages. Get some savings on the reservoir contracts. And the pumping contracts was well up. And then we're able to offset that with a drop on the water capital equipment tools to bring that into what our quotes were just most recently. And that balances the water fund, and then there's some minor changes on the police fund. Excuse me, we received about $8 grand more on the traffic fines. There were some office chairs or something there seemed to be purchased, and then I've just reduced the surplus transfer, dropped it down to 68, so that balances the police fund. So that balances the financial plan for 2019, and then I just show you the ones I've got outlined there. I've just put into 2020 so that you see the balance of the fire truck and the public works yard improvements. And then we originally had in the final 4 years of each year for paving contracts was 1.2. This just happened to drop down to balance, so that still allows Kevin to go forward with paving work and getting things ready for next year. That may not be the final number, but it's there to allow progress at the start of the year. So those three numbers, these two particular are carry forwards that was definitely going to happen. This one hopefully will happen, but this one we're definitely committed to. So I wanted to get it into 2020 so that that request for the final payment may come in January, February. So. And again, the bottom line is everything's balanced. Down to the final numbers right across the board and then that's just a sneak preview of what's in the schedule that's going to be amended to the financial plan bylaw for the 3 readings. So it's all balanced. Questions?
Councilor Smith.
Mr. Dickens, Unit 223 was 25,000. We spent 36 on it. Would we be doing that with different?
$12,000 for head gasket replacement, various other repairs done at that time. $7,000 for sandblasting and painting the box and part of the frame, and $6,500 for the main hydraulic box cylinder for that to be replaced.
So it's in pretty good shape now. The other one is Unit 564. It was quite a bit less than we projected, 25,000, and that is the
Sweeper.
That's a sweeper.
That's a good year for the sweeper then.
It is a good year, yeah. Historically, we've been spending about $25,000, so that's what we set the budget.
Yeah, that's much better. And this year they did a really good job of the street sweep. That's really, And the other one was PCC capital upgrades. The difference in that is because that was the last of the sewage plant or something.
Yeah, this is the tail end of the upgrade project, the lagoon upgrades as well as the DAP plant. Some additional costs were due to some additional contract administration based on issues we were having with commissioning. $16,000 of that was an emergency shower which we were regulated to have based on the chemicals that we're using out there. And we had an issue with our water supply from our small well. We were actually, the volume of the water was exceeded what the parameters that the plant needed, so we had to put in a variable frequency drive to adjust the output of that pump. And that was another 3,000.
Oh, thanks.
Excuse me, you're down there, Councilor Meadow.
I just wanted to touch, you said you had to put in an emergency shower, like that's for, like it gives you a chemical in your eyes or whatever. $16,000 shower?
I wash and shower, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because you have to have,
Probably that's gonna cost.
that's the going rate for those in an industrial setting. You have to have tempered water, so you need a hot water tank. Yeah, mixing valves. That's the going rate for those. It's expensive, I know. It seems ridiculous, but it is what it is.
A lot of people's complete bathroom renovation in residential setting, you know.
Staggering. Excuse me, Councilor Erickson.
Roads and wages benefit, that's where you went down quite a bit, and Dale answered, do we still have these people off work? Are they still in compensation?
We still have one individual off work, and he's been off work since he injured himself when we were augmenting solid waste collection. So it's back in May.
So we'll see more savings there?
Yeah, he's not back to work, so,
You haven't replaced anybody?
well, we brought in a time-durated employee to cover off for him, but there was a lapse in service there for a while.
All right, any other questions, council? All right, thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Jim.
Any questions from the public for items relevant to the agenda from the presentation we've just seen? Hearing none, motion to close, please. Second, all in favor? Opposed, carried. We adjourn the regular meeting in about 5 minutes.